And how do we know it's on there?
I think it's always on.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I don't hear it. But this might be a switch.
I don't think you're gonna hear a broadcast. I think it's just their recording.
That might be,
Right,
that might,
just a hot mic.
Yeah.
is
So
it?
It don't
Okay.
project or anything,
Okay.
but it's on.
You might maybe ask
It's a little different.
if they could.
When did they get
or
these?
If they could rearrange.
I don't know, they were before my
Thanks,
time,
Kirsten.
but that doesn't say much. 'Cause I-
Hi.
That's gonna do, I'm sorry to bother.
And you're not bothering us at all. We're so grateful you're here.
We were just wondering if it might be possible to ask you to switch seats so that
Yeah.
we can see those guys,
Oh,
because you're big.
Yeah, I'm gonna, don't worry,
Such great shoulders.
I'm gonna move.
Thank
I'll just,
you.
I'll hide here until Jim comes.
Thank you,
But
sorry.
I do think someone's gonna sit right here.
Okay, it is better if we can scooch towards that end of the table. We'll do the best we can, but
Yeah.
we know that
Yeah,
it is what it is.
yeah.
Thank you, I'm sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, until we get
Yeah, I
these
don't-
cameras working.
No,
it's such
someday.
a-
They're so nice.
There's
and
3, you know? We got 1, actually 4. So the 4 should be able to like capture all the
Yeah, it'll be pretty
views.
cool.
We're setting up.
So, huh?
They may be, they just
Well-
can't broadcast.
We saw him in the elevator.
I don't know if it came up as gender planning. I don't think so. But, I mean, I was off the top of the period.
What?
You're right, go ahead.
Two smoking, there's supposed to be a second presentation?
No, there should be just one smoking.
Okay.
Did you get this one? You got this one, right? I
Yep.
think you just did this about the duplicate.
Okay.
I'll take it from you, I'll put it back there. Is there any someone wants it?
Alright, I'm starting at 7 whether nobody shows up or not.
For your first meeting as the chair.
Meeting adjourned, 7:01.
Still, what, 3 minutes, 4 minutes?
This is the first PNS meeting, right?
Yep.
Maybe they forgot that there was this committee. Yeah.
How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Yeah, it'll stop doing its thing, and I should make sure it's doing it both. And no, well, what I would do is let it do its thing,
Which one,
and
you're
then
right?
at the end, but finalize,
Take it out.
you would play each disc. And you would, so like take out this
I think so.
A, so that you know you're being beat.
Hey.
How are you, sir?
Cash.
What was that?
You're so unpredictable.
Well, no, I just came
Greg?
to make sure.
Hey, how you doing? Pardon me?
I just was here until.
7:01.
You guys are blocking the right?
No, I agree. We should, all right, let's see how fast we can move through this. So we'll be out of here by 7:30? 7:45?
You want me to speak talk?
Sure. You're second, right?
They're gonna switch because mine usually goes faster than theirs.
All right, man, I'll see you tomorrow.
And Daisy will appreciate, so I can go home and feed her.
Go home and beat her? Is that what
Feed her. Daisy the
I think
dog.
you go home and beat her. What?
Daisy the dog. She doesn't like late dinner.
You know what, I'll write her name down real quick.
Well, I had lunch with Liz. She knows the meeting starts at 7. So
Yeah.
She gave me her proxy, so we can just move forward.
Yeah.
I'll text
I
her.
figured I'd adjourn at 7:01 for lack of a forum.
there you go.
That would be so fun. You know, it'd almost be worth it.
Yes.
sister, she has one of those avatars.
Uh-huh.
So what she's talking about, Trump is
He
I can't believe he won.
He did.
And
With by lot, the last I saw was like 38%, with the
Yeah,
next
you're
one,
Kasich
15.
is,
Yeah,
Kasich-
15.
Kasich did well,
yeah,
but I mean, they kind
And
of all
Sanders
tied
beat
for second.
Hillary.
yeah, by big, 19 points.
That was expected,
Maybe
though.
mistake.
Did you hear his speech at all?
No?
I heard a little bit.
I heard a little bit. Yeah.
You heard Bernie's speech?
Well, just a tad. I was.
Just a tad.
It's a little odd at party. He was talking about needing to come together, like almost like he knew he was going to lose eventually. You know, it's like the party needs to come together
The party. He said that, right?
at his winning speech almost.
That is weird.
Well,
Who sang,
it
who
will.
sang that song? Come Together. Who sang?
Beatles?
Was that the
The
Beatles?
Beatles,
Yeah, okay.
Who said the Beatles?
The Beatles. You sing? You should sing.
Environmental, most revised.
We revised him today.
Yeah, since you know, and that's been better places for it.
I remember New Hampshire in 1968 really well. That's when I was
Cool.
going
You should
to
read this
college
before we go.
that next year.
Before you go, unless you've
What'd
already
you
read
go
it.
to college?
I haven't.
Yeah, place this thing.
A mistake.
'Cause that's what we're talking about
Paul
tonight.
University in India.
Didn't like it?
No, not at that point in time. You had to live in a fraternity, basically.
Oh.
And my pledge trainer was.
Okay, it passes on a 3-to-1 vote with
Jay
no.
Danforth Whale. Danforth.
Unless Mark changes his mind from the last time you guys talked about this stuff.
He moved to band all smoking. I should have
You
seconded
should
it.
taught
I would have
him how to
seconded it.
spell.
Because he
I
was
would've-
just bullshitting.
I
was
would have
like,
done it just to screw with him.
yeah, I absolutely would have done it.
Backstory's too long, but he wrote.
And then we would have passed it.
it.
He would have been shocked. Awesome.
My nickname was because I was in Washington, D.C. It said, DC.
Well, Jim, this is good work.
Which one is that?
The smell.
On the,
Yeah,
thing from last
that's
night?
really good. It's not from last night. It's on the smoking thing.
Oh,
On going with the county.
Hey,
All right.
we just adjourned. We didn't have a quorum.
No quorum.
Back to the.
All right, can we go ahead and start?
Yeah, just start. No, Liz is supposed to be here. She'll arrive.
How are you?
I'm good. Please, they've got the names. Do you want to switch the name tags?
well, you just
He's-
got an update anyway. Here she is.
Okay,
No.
let's switch it.
Yes.
Policy and services?
Taking this as a seat.
Oh, no, we don't do
That's
that
okay, we
there.
can switch it.
It's fine.
I'm very attentive this evening.
You sat where you were used to sitting.
Exactly.
No problem.
No, it's my fault. So
You guys know Samantha B at all?
I know who she is. Yeah.
She was really funny late last night about the primary.
Oh, really?
Excoriatingly funny, but she has lots of material to work with.
All right, so clerk, can we go ahead and call the roll?
Sure. Councilmember Berman,
Here.
Chair Du Bois,
Here.
Councilmember Niss, Vice Mayor Sharp,
Here.
3 present.
Okay. So I guess now we're at oral communications. If anybody from the public wants to speak on something not on the agenda, I don't have any items. Okay, so we're going to switch.
Wait.
Sorry.
I didn't know you guys were going to be over here. So should I just give this to you?
Sure. And if you could, so we've Rita. How do you say your last name? Farrell. If you could speak there at the microphone.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So these are for... No problem. Thanks. Okay, so I'm Rita Farrell, and I wanted to thank you all for continuing to hear
concerns about dewatering in our community groundwater as California enters its 4.5 year of drought. I want to thank the previous Policy and Services Committee for referring residents' concerns about groundwater to the full City Council, and the City Council for instructing staff to move forward with a 3-tier approach, including metering groundwater extracted during residential basement construction. 2 of the Policy and Services Committee members, Mr. Scharf and Ms. Niss, are new and may not have listened to the previous committee discussions regarding dewatering and the many questions, answers, and ideas that were bantered around on 12/1 and 12/15. This was about very close to 3 hours of discussion. I listened to both of them the other night, and many of the ideas that were discussed were not brought forward by staff, and many of them will come forward in the second and third tier. But if you do have extra time and you have nothing to do, it's fascinating listening. I handed out 2 events that you might be interested in. The first, and they're in our neighborhood. The first is Peter Gillick, who is part of the Pacific Institute. He's the president, and it's going to be down in Sunnyvale on February 17th. It's $10. The second handout has to do with, sponsored by Peninsula Open Space. It's called When Demand Outstrips Supply, the Shrinking Water Table and What We Can Do About It. This is going to be at the Mountain View Center for the Performing Arts on April 26th at 8 p.m. And I was looking for additional information on the drought, and you can go into CaliforniaDrought.org, and they have this whole website that is put on by the Pacific Institute, and it has fascinating information. Thank you.
Thanks. So we're going to do an agenda change and do item 2 before item 1. And I did talk to staff. We're going to try to allocate a half an hour to item 2, the maximum, and then probably about an hour to item 1. So I don't have any.
We can use less if we.
Can use less if we need to. I don't have any public speakers for item number 2. So, Harriet.
Good evening, Harriet Richardson, City Auditor, here to present the Office of the City Auditor's quarterly report as of December 31st, 2015. So some highlights of activities during the quarter. We published and presented the audit of parking funds, which presented 2 findings and 8 recommendations related to the parking in lieu and parking permit fees. The primary issues were that they needed better methodology to track the cost of construction and update parking in lieu fees in a timely manner, and that the errors caused the city to overdraw the bonds used to construct the 2 most recently built garages. They will be defeasing a portion of, ASD will be defeasing a portion of those bonds to correct that. And we presented the city's financial statements and reports presented by Macias, Genie, and O'Connell, the city's external financial auditor, to the Finance Committee for recommendation to the council to accept. And we also initiated, so the financial audit was expiring. It ran for 5 years. The external financial auditor contract ran for 5 years, and we initiated the request for proposal process and evaluated proposals received for the city's external financial auditor for fiscal years 2016 through 2020. We're currently processing that contract, and that will be presented to the council as a consent item on the March 14th agenda. We are expecting to retain the same firm. And then Senior Performance Auditor Mimi Wang was asked to give a presentation at the Association of Local Government Auditors annual conference in May. on the Office of the City Auditor's use of SharePoint as a low-cost alternative to traditional commercial audit management software. We'll also do a presentation to ELT in 2 weeks on the ways that we're using it. By implementing SharePoint in our office, we were able to save $12,000 a year by discontinuing our use of Teammate, which is a commercial audit management software package. And then I was invited by the Comptroller General of the United States to sit on the Government Auditing Standards Advisory Council in the world of auditors. That is probably the most prestigious appointment you can get, so I'm happy to announce that I'll be serving on that council.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So moving on to the audits that we're doing, the active audits, the franchise fee audit. This has been a very complex audit. It seems like every time we turn around, there's a new issue coming up. We've been working very closely with the city attorney on this audit. I'm wrapping up some issues on that this week, and we should be able to move forward with that shortly. We do have it tentatively scheduled to present to the Policy and Services Committee in April. I already mentioned that we wrapped up the parking funds audit. We have 3 audits that are currently in fieldwork phase. They were in the planning phase at the end of the quarter. That's the disability rates and workers' compensation audit, the utilities customer service billing and rate accuracy audit, and the citywide analytical development and continuous monitoring audit of procure to pay, which is really focusing on accounts payable regarding duplicate payments and duplicate master records for vendors. So all of those, the auditors have been actively discussing the issues that they've been identifying as the audits progress. We're also doing a fee schedules audit that has not progressed past the planning phase, while the auditor working on that has focused on the procure to pay continuous monitoring audit. And then we're also doing another continuous monitoring audit on overtime. That one was in planning at the end of the quarter, and the auditor has done some field work on that, but has primarily been focusing on the workers' comp audit. That one's scheduled to be presented in August. And then as of the end of the quarter, we were in the process of finishing up the National Citizen Survey and the performance report. Both of those were scheduled to be presented to the council at the annual retreat on January 30th, and that did happen, but they were in progress at the end of the quarter. So on an annual basis, we have one auditor who works with a consultant and also does work on her own to identify businesses that may have underreported their sales and use tax. To date this year, we've collected $16,912. That included $15,404 for this quarter. We are on the low side for the year. I did go back and look at previous years, and we are actually lower than each of the last 4 fiscal years. So I will be monitoring that. We may want to look at whether that is work that we should continue doing, whether it's cost effective to continue doing that work in our office. And then we've continued doing our city auditor advisory role, serving on the Utilities Risk Oversight Committee, the Library Bond Oversight Committee, and the IT Governance Review Board, and the Information Security Steering Committee. We are expecting the Library Bond Oversight Committee to wrap up pretty soon, and so that role will go away when that happens. So new in this year, in this quarterly report, we started to put the status of audit recommendations as just a summary here, because the departments are now reporting directly to you on the status of those recommendations. So during this quarter, we implemented, the departments implemented 45 recommendations that allowed us to close out 3 audits: the Employee Ethics Policies Audit, the SAP Security Audit, and the Solid Waste Program Audit. We still have 2 audits that are more than 5 years old. Those are in progress: fleet utilization and replacement. I know that we will be closing that one out on the next quarterly report. and the citywide cash handling and travel expense audit. The other audits are newer audits, but they still need some work to get those closed out. And then the last item on the report is the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. So during fiscal year 16, we received 10 complaints. 7 of those were variations of the same issue. For all of these complaints, for 9 of the complaints, we used an external investigator to investigate them. For one, we used an internal staff investigated them. We did close out all of those audits as being unsubstantiated. And so moving forward, we currently have no open investigations. That completes my report, and I'll answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Harriet, for the presentation, and congratulations on being invited to serve on the Government Auditing Standards Advisory Council. Very cool. A couple of questions that I had, mainly about the last page of the report, the status of audit recommendations. So the first is kind of just a point. I was confused at first, and I actually just figured out the confusion. But the graph at the bottom,
yes,
it seems like it should really be broken out into 3 different. What it looked like was that the number of recommendations open was 110.
right. So the 65 should have actually been 66.
Well, no, but it also should be a separate bar, because what that is that's the recommendations that were open July to September,
Yes.
and the 45 on top is there's essentially the 45 same recommendations showing that
45 of the 66, correct.
But
Okay.
but it shows, yeah. Do you kind of see what I'm?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that'll just make it a little more easy to follow. On and this might be a question for Jim, but on the inventory management, the utility meter audit, and the police department Palo Animal Services audit. Well, I guess it shows that those are in progress. So is it that, or Harriet, do you feel like staff is moving forward on things, or have things just totally been dropped and aren't being acted upon, or are we in progress, or are we wide open?
I'll let Harriet speak to it, but also when we're at the end, you'll see on the March 22nd Policy and Services Committee, we'll actually have an audit update on animal services fleet in inventory before Policy and Services. So we'll have the staff here to give the
More
response.
detail. Perfect.
Okay, so animal services, I know that there's some work being done on that. I know that they went out for an RFP, and that there's some work being done on that. The utility meter audit, I have not received any update. On the fleet management, I have reviewed after the end of this quarter. I have since reviewed the status report and know that we'll be closing that one. The inventory management audit, we did receive a draft of the status report, and I know I talked to the auditor today on that one who was reviewing it, and there are some issues we are going to have to go back on, so I'm not sure how many of those will actually end up being closed or will remain in progress at this point.
Okay, and so sorry, so you said the utility meter audit you had not gotten an update on?
Correct.
So Jim, is there any plan to?
That one is, again, on a slower track, scheduled for the April 12th Policy and Services Committee meeting. So
Okay.
that would explain that.
Okay, and I know there's been changes at
Yeah.
utilities, et cetera. So, and then a question on the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. So you mentioned that 7 were determined not to fit within the parameters of the hotline.
Well, actually, several of them. The 7 refer to variations of the same issue.
Okay, so in hypothetically speaking, maybe not necessarily with that specific example then, but if something is reported that doesn't fit necessarily within the confines of fraud, waste, and abuse, what happens then? Is there something that gets investigated, or does it just get dropped completely because it doesn't?
So most
Fit
of
this
these
purpose.
we did determine did not fit within the protocols that we set for the hotline, which was that they would be fraud, waste, or abuse topics. but they still did get investigated.
Okay, and acted upon if warranted.
Yes.
Okay, great. And then fraud, waste, and abuse meaning abuse of city funds and that kind of thing, or abuse meaning my boss yelled at me and I'm mad at them about it.
It does not mean that.
Okay.
It does mean more like the first. Abuse is abuse of resources, city resources. My boss yelled at me would be treated more like a personnel type of action.
Handled by HR then?
Correct.
Or,
However, it is the type of thing you could look at and say, is it abuse of authority? But we aren't currently looking at it that way.
okay.
Many of the things we get end up involving HR, they can involve the city attorney. And this predated, I think, your being on the council or when we were discussing this, but it's pretty clear that the definitions of fraud, waste, and abuse get fuzzier the further away you get away from fraud, for example. And the truth is, it's sort of like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. People can still make complaints based on their perception of saying, I think this is some kind of an issue. And it can be then the initial investigation would say, well, that really doesn't meet that test, or it does potentially. Or it is something else, but then sometimes they'll sort of say, maybe, who knows, maybe a relationship, just a problem between two people. And then we can refer to that. And then often still address that and deal with that in some way, even though it doesn't rise to the level.
Correct. Thanks. Sure.
Liz?
I'm going to start coughing. So, Harry, would you go into some more detail into the sales and use tax and the fact that there are 52 potential misallocations and so forth?
So we fill out a form when we identify a business that has potentially underpaid its taxes. We fill out a form that's
Did
called.
they purposely do it?
Well,
Or is
not
that the question?
We don't know because we don't actually do the audit. So we fill out a form called a short form. We send it to the State Board of Equalization and they do the investigation. Usually it's been where they allocated their tax, for example, to a different city accidentally. It's not usually intentional that they don't pay, it's that it's usually misallocated to another city. We also contract with Muni Services who does similar work. So the 52, we do rely on the state to do the audit work on that and send us back and tell us, yes, they identified it as a misallocation and they're transferring the funds back to the city. The auditor in my office who works on that told me that they have a backlog at the state due to some staff shortages. That's why you see so many that are pending at the state. 52 is a pretty large number of short forms to be waiting to be reviewed.
But not a huge amount of money, right?
And we don't know until we actually get it. Sometimes, so I went back and looked at previous quarters, and the range that we get in any one quarter, we had 2 quarters in the past 5 years where we didn't get anything, and then we had 1 quarter where we only got $6,200. Then we had a quarter where we got $93,000, and so it really kind of depends on the business and how the money was misallocated.
Okay, thanks, Tom. That was my question.
Great.
Yeah, just briefly. So on the parking funds audit, just so I understood, we gave money back.
We are going to. It hasn't been done yet.
And who do we give the money back to?
So there's no one here from SD. What they're actually, the intent is to defease a portion of the bonds, which means they'll call in some of the bonds,
Oh, so we paid off the bonds.
a portion of them,
We paid off
yes.
a portion of the bonds.
I believe that they are going to do that when they do the, once they get approval on the mid-year budget adjustments.
So it's been a little while since I thought about this. So we have, these are the open audits
Yes.
on the page, right? And you said that the fleet utilization and replacement audit is likely to be closed really soon?
It will. I've already reviewed the status report, so
And
that's.
so that's the 4
Yes.
recommendations will have then been completed?
Yes.
Okay. And so on each of these, we're on very few recommendations left to be completed with the exception of the inventory management one, right? And the utility meter audit one.
Correct.
So-
And utility meters and animal services were just released last year, so.
So why does it take so long to get the audit recommendations done? I mean, it's years, like what?
Well, I don't know that it's always years.
Okay, 2008, we have gone finally completed, right, on the employees' ethics. 2010, we have 4 left.
Well,
I'm just asking. I mean,
Well-
you said I don't know why if it takes years, so.
I'd say it takes, let's see, how long is it taking us to assess and make changes in our enterprise system that isn't subject to an audit, our ERP? 6, 7 years we've been working on it. So, I mean, a lot of these things are change efforts. In this case, the auditor identifies deficiency or changes. And in truth, there's sometimes about even working through whether or not what does it take to actually implement the change, which is sometimes more difficult than identifying the change and whether or not it really has a good payoff for us. And then there's back and forth and that sort of thing. So you can help out.
Yeah, well, I'd also like to add, on the animal services audit, that was really the first audit where I was completely involved after I arrived here. And I made a bigger effort than I think had been done in the past to work with the city manager's office and staff affected by the audit to make sure that the recommendations would be feasible. I know that for that particular one, there's sometimes a progression that you can't do some things until you've done other things. So on that particular one, that's definitely the case. But I think as moving forward, we are trying to make more of an effort to make sure the recommendations make sense, that they're feasible, that they can be implemented, although it doesn't necessarily always mean they can be implemented quickly. One of the other things that I've asked my staff to do, because of the ERP project, to start making note of weaknesses that are the result of the current SAP system, and rather than focusing on making changes to that when we're going to be changing from SAP to something new, which might still be SAP, but a newer version of it, to make recommendations, or to hold off on those, that we would make a list so that we can make sure that we're addressing those types of issues as the new ERP system is implemented.
So the next time we see this report, the ones that have zeros will no longer be on here. Is that
Correct. And so as we issue new audits, you'll start seeing those added. As audits get closed, they'll fall off the list.
So when we complete an audit, right, and there's a bunch of recommendations, I remember you come and present the audit, and the department head is usually here. That was sort of the last right time I remember it. And then there's sometimes discussions about whether or not we think that we should implement the recommendations, and we have that discussion. Would it be also helpful, and maybe it's not easy to do, but to set expectations, at least for council members and the public, a little bit of, well, these are the 14 recommendations, we agree they need to be done, but we need to do this one first, so we expect that this will be done over a 2-year period, or we expect that we'll, I mean, is there any of that that's sort of, because it's really hard to do oversight as a council member when, you see this on an infrequent basis. The audit recommendations hang around, and maybe for a really good reason, I'm not saying they don't, but it's really hard to do any sort of oversight and, and figure that out.
So when we issue an audit now, when we ask for the audit response from the departments, which basically come through the city manager, we give them a template as the audit recommendation, list the audit recommendation, and then we ask them to write their implementation plan and an estimated completion date. And the status reports that you will start seeing as the new committee, those take that template and they update that status. And so you'll see the original estimated completion date, and then you'll see how that changes over time if the recommendation did not get implemented by that date.
And on the fraud, waste, abuse, and hotline, have we ever had a complaint that turned out to be legitimate?
The only one that turned out to be legitimate was the one that our office investigated by doing an audit, and that was the contract oversight trenching and installation of electrical
And
substations.
that originally came in,
Last year or something.
That was 2013.
so that was one of the 7 in 2013, and that we then launched an audit.
Yes.
Okay.
I can assure you, we have other complaints that don't come through the hotline that are valid. I mean, so
No, I'm-
those would be the only ones.
No, I was just wondering, you know, I mean, it's nice to have a fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, I suppose, but I'm just really curious as to some extent, how effective it's being, and, you know, whether or not it takes a lot of staff time, and, you know, or maybe it doesn't take much staff time at all, and whether or not it's being useful. And it may be, I'm just curious as to, you know, we've had one out of, you know, I can do quick math, I guess, out of 22.
You don't want to be known as the person who gets rid of fraud
Yeah.
I definitely want to be known as the person who gets rid of fraud, waste, and abuse.
hotline.
Oh, maybe not the hotline, but fraud, waste, and abuse, yes.
No.
But I do want metrics on things, and I actually disagree. I actually think that part of our role is to be, not necessarily be political, and that if, you know,
I can see
if,
the headline now.
that's fine, I can see the headline too, and I'd stand up for it. I'd say if we had, I'm not ready on 22, but I would say that, you know, if we go 5 years, and we have one legitimate complaint, and you tell me it takes 100 staff hours a year, I think that's a waste of staff time. And I would, at that point, suggest we get rid of it.
Thank
But,
God we actually all vote.
So, and I would say, right now, it's not taking a lot of our staff time based on the number of hours, but I will say that it is costly to do an investigation, particularly if we're hiring outside investigators.
So,
anyway,
are you good? Okay.
I'm done beating that dead horse.
Can I try to take this moving on?
Okay, I just want to say one
Sure.
thing real quick. I think as it relates to the schedule, I think it's important to remember that there is a very specific process for audits in the back and forth. And I don't want to say that it's kind of like lawyers exchanging, you know, briefs and back, but there is an aspect of that. And there's a time frame and a gap. And so let's just take the employee ethics policies. That is done, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, not only have we adopted, 2 years ago, the ethics policy, we are training every single employee through the Institute of Local Government, the only city in all of California to train every employee in our half-day in our ethics program and our ethics policy. And yet, because of the way we sequence this, and a lot of this was stuff languishing before Harriet got here, do you know what I mean, to actually close something out. We just haven't gotten to that.
Good. So this is your work plan for the quarter. I guess what happens after June 16th? You're not starting any audits that are further out?
We, if someone finishes an audit, they will get started on a new audit that's currently on our work plan, our
Right.
adopted
But right now,
work
nobody's
plan.
working on anything that's beyond June, it looks like.
Correct.
Okay.
And
So come June, we
I
potentially
will
have a
be
bunch
com-
of people freeing up.
well, I'll be coming forward with a new audit plan for next year. So in the past, they presented the audit plan usually at the first Policy and Services Committee after the summer break. And last year I did it early, so it would be in effect, and that's by the time the fiscal year starts, and that's my plan to try and have presented at the June Policy and Services Committee. So we always have it at the beginning of the fiscal year.
Okay, good. And then on the status table, is it true that the difference between open and total are the closed ones, or is there any
Yes.
other status? Okay.
That is true.
And is it worth showing a status column of not just open, but maybe items in contention? Is there such a category?
I would say they're really.
Is that the terminology?
Well, so this negotiation back and forth. So there are ones that are going to be implemented and they have a work plan. There may be others that remain open with no work plan.
Right, and I would say for the older ones where I wasn't here, and I can give you an example on the travel expense audit, where there was an old recommendation that didn't necessarily make sense. I've been trying to work through those with the departments.
Do you
And
just
as
close
an
them out
example-
yourself?
Well, as an example, for the travel expense one, there was a recommendation that we should be making sure that we have a receipt for every meal when employees travel. And that's a very administratively costly way to manage your travel expenses. Per diem is more common, it's accepted by the IRS, it's the way the federal government does it. There's a study that the federal government did where they went back and revisited. And so when I met with ASD, we worked through that and said, you know, I don't think that recommendation is a reasonable recommendation. And they revised the travel policy based on me saying, no, you don't have to get receipts. So I'm trying to work through some of those to make them not be contentious moving forward.
Okay. And then the last question, just on the hotline, I think we had talked at one point about maybe you putting together some materials. Now that we have a new HR director,
Correct.
Go ahead and do that, or?
And well, one of the things I want to do is go back and talk to some other cities that have hotlines and see how they're doing it. I do have policies and procedures from the city of Toronto, which is considered kind of the model for how hotlines are handled. I don't have any from other cities yet, but I plan to get those and just kind of look through and see, are we doing it the right way, or should we be doing it differently?
Did they get any complaints about their mayor?
I was shocked. Okay. Last city I saw.
I asked that question, they told me the mayor is actually well liked.
Yeah.
I think he's a council member now.
Yeah. So can I get a motion to accept the auditor's report?
So moved.
Whatever you need.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric.
All right, moving on to item 2, which we will try to do in 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Let's do it 30.
that would be very nice.
Be able to do this to Phil
Ready.
coming up, or?
Trying to. Staff has a presentation.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna run downstairs. I have a cough drop lesson. You will want me to hook up.
Okay.
So we can turn back to the.
Greg said you gave him his proxy anyway.
So I guess we'll do a staff presentation, and then we have one member of the public who wants to speak.
We're in a quorum, let's go.
I don't trust the guy that wants to get rid of
Go ahead.
the fraud and abuse
Let
hotline.
me just do
I
that.
know.
Can you do introductions?
I wouldn't either.
Putting it, I call that road for
Kirsten Sturm Public Works is going to give a real brief presentation, since many of you have been through this before. And our Nicole from the county is here, County Health, who's supported us before and answered questions. And we have Terrence from our attorney's office here, and the new guy is really helpful on this one, because in San Francisco he was a big part of the same issue, so he's got a lot of great experience for us. So our team is a good one, and we're excited about bringing this back to you. I would just, in the way of introduction, say, remember there's two parts to this that we're bringing back tonight. One is the multifamily, and the second is retailer licensing. So those are two sort of distinct things, but in the interest of your time and everybody's time, we are bringing these back together. And they're at different points in their lives, too. You asked for a ordinance for multifamily, so we actually have a draft ordinance that we're coming back with. On retailer licensing, a bit more complicated. We'll explain to you where we stand on that one. There's a possibility of the county running the program. There's a possibility of the city running the program. So it's not as sort of advanced or as far along as the multifamily issue, where we actually have a draft ordinance for you tonight. So that's my little intro, and we'll ask Kirsten to go into more detail.
Not much more detail. Okay, so we'll do background, draft ordinance, multifamily, tobacco retailer licensing, and then the recommendations. And we also have an at-places memo. So in terms of background, the November 2015 Policy and Services directed us to include e-cigarettes, and that was approved. There was already a first and second reading of the full council of that ordinance, and then to develop a draft ordinance to expand smoking ban to multifamily properties, which is attached, and the direction to develop approaches to implement tobacco retailer licensing. So the draft ordinance includes all multifamily, rental and condos, anything above 2 units, indoor and outdoor common areas. It requires notification and lease provisions as well as signage. It allows for outdoor smoking areas to be set up based on criteria in the ordinance, and it includes a buffer zone around the multifamily. For tobacco retailer licensing, the County of Santa Clara is willing to administer on behalf of the City of Palo Alto. What we would need to do, we've only had 1 meeting so far, but what we would have to do is adopt the county's tobacco retail licensing ordinance, which is one of the most advanced, and it actually has a minimum age for purchase of tobacco and e-cigarettes of 21, a complete ban on selling any flavored tobacco, and no new retailers within 1,000 feet of a school, 5,000 feet of each other, or in a pharmacy, but that's only for new. And the other main thing is the retail license is not transferable. So if somebody moves out of their spot that is currently selling tobacco, then the new person, if they are within 1,000 feet of a school, 500 feet of each other, or in a pharmacy, will not be able to get another license for that location. So the recommendation is to refer the draft revisions of the city's smoking ordinance banning smoking in multifamily housing to council for discussion on available resources, prioritization, and further staff direction on the ordinance revision, and then direct staff to continue discussions with the County of Santa Clara on regulatory mechanisms related to retail sale of tobacco. And as indicated in the At Places memo, what is likely needed is an MOU with the county, and then an adoption of an ordinance by Palo Alto naming the county as our agent to implement the tobacco retail licensing, similar to the way San Mateo County cities have done it with San Mateo County. And that's it for my presentation.
Thank you. So I guess we'll go to the member of the public, Mary Dimmett.
Hi, good evening. My name is Mary Dimmett, and I've lived in a condominium complex for almost 30 years near downtown Palo Alto. I wanted to thank the staff and the Policy and Services Committee for bringing this up and including multifamily and townhouses and with apartments for the smoking ban, because I think it's very worthwhile. I wanted to tell you why. I'm a past board president and treasurer of a number of years for our association, and at our annual meetings that we hold once a year, 4 of the past 5, we've had numerous residents come up and ask that we implement a smoking ban or do something in our CC&Rs. And our property manager keeps telling us that we cannot include it in our CC&Rs because there's no way to enforce it, and in fact he recommended that the city do it, and then they could take action. So I'm not representing all the owners today. I'm representing myself. I just wanted to pass that along and how it affects our family. Most of our units do not have any air conditioning. It's a building that's over 50 years old. We leave our windows open at night during the summer and days like today. And unfortunately, there are just a few people that smoke, and most of us, we don't want to infringe on their right to smoke, but it does come and bother us. So as much as possible, if we see someone smoking or if smoke starts coming in, we close up all our windows. The problem is that it happens at night when we've already gone to bed, or it happens when we're in the front room and it goes in the back room where our children are, and then the smoke's in there, and once it's in there, even if you close it up, then it can't go anywhere. We have a very nice neighbor who does international work, and so he's up a lot at 2, 3, and 4 in the morning. And those really hot days when it's 90 inside our units and we open the windows, we can't do anything about it. So thank you very much. I urge you to approve and include the multifamily in condos and pass this on up to council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this is actually the third time we've talked about this issue. We've had public health experts here. We've had a lot of members of the public in previous meetings. So Mark, it's okay. I figured we'd let Liz and Greg go first if you guys have questions or want some background on things that have happened already.
No, I know what happened.
Good. Do you have any questions?
I have a bunch of stuff, yeah. So, I guess the first question is, why don't we take them up separately? Is that all right?
Sure. So should we?
So let's do the first thing, which would be the
First one,
multifamily.
let's make smoking in Palo Alto.
No, that's the third one, if Mark wants to make that motion again.
The what? Oh, yeah.
This time you get a second.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So anyway, thank you very much for the report. I appreciate it. In terms of the multifamily recommendations, I read the ordinance. I thought the draft ordinance was really good. I think we should pass it tonight. I don't really see much reason to refer it to council for discussion on prioritization and further staff direction. I mean, that's the point of committee work, frankly. And our agendas are really full, and we have trouble getting through things. So I think we should be efficient and pass the ordinance. I mean, I think it's a perfectly good ordinance. I don't see any reason why there needs to be more discussion on it. Policy and Services heard it 3 times, I mean, roughly.
Assuming we all agree?
Yeah, I know, assuming we all agree. And in terms of enforcement issues, I think the really important stuff to think about in enforcement here is what our public speaker said, is that if you pass this, then it goes into the leases, and so the landlord does some self-enforcing, and in the condominiums, you put it in the CC&Rs if you want, and also the condominium owner or the condominium association can enforce it then through a variety of means, because then a person who's doing that is violating the law, frankly. And so there's lots of mechanisms to do that. So I think there's a lot of self-enforcement that happens out there. And I think in terms of our resources, I think it should just basically be a complaint-based thing. I mean, I don't think we're going to, sweep condominiums or whatever for smokers. So I think it's really just a complaint-based issue. And I think we should pass it tonight. And I actually think you guys have done a great job on Policy and Services going through this process. And I know I actually was working with the county on the PICH stuff through the Cities Association. And I know that there's a lot of interest in the Cities Association, frankly, and we'll probably take this up as a priority next year to try and get all the cities in the county to move in this direction. So that's what I have.
Liz, do you have anything?
So, I wonder if a little history is helpful. As I recall, the first time a no smoking ordinance was passed in Palo Alto was in you might remember, Phil, 1992, I think. At which time, every merchant and every bar told us that they would go broke. And the result was, a year later when we looked at the sales tax, thinking of Harriet tonight, people were coming into Palo Alto to eat because there was no smoking. It was absolutely fascinating. And then fast forward, I was at the county when we started doing this, and initially, it's almost always the same complaint. It'll be so difficult to enforce. What happens is just what Greg said. It is self-enforced. If you are not supposed to smoke, and Greg lights up, somebody says right next to him, "You can't smoke in here, You're not allowed to." And you would not believe how fast that it stops. And I'm so sympathetic to a multi-unit building where when you open the windows, the smoke's just going to pour in no matter what. So as I looked through this, I thought, and in addition, you saw the policy implications for the comp plan, which I thought were good as well. The one thing that I did notice, though, is constantly it's called out that it's hard to enforce, and that had to do with the educational materials and so forth. As I said, I think it's self-enforced. Some things will continue. There's almost no way you can stop undercover sales and that kind of thing. I know that. But for the most part, when you have a community that has really ruled this out, I think you, first of all, it generates a lot of publicity, and there'll be a lot of feedback about that. But secondly, the county has had very good luck with it. And I don't think that we're I just don't think we're plowing any new ground here. So I would suggest the same thing. I would, rather than refer this, I would pass it as a committee and put it on consent and send it on to the full council.
Thanks. So Mary, hearing your story, is exactly like mine. I live in a multi-unit building downtown, second floor. It gets crazy hot, and there have been times where I've had to literally like bedroom, bathroom, second bedroom, race to close the windows as soon as I smell somebody smoking, and you can never get there fast enough. I hopefully this will provide some relief to those of us who face this situation. I just had a couple of questions, and I agree that if we pass this unanimously, that we should that it should go on consent. We've got a ton of stuff going on at council, and I think including Corey and Pat, who were on this committee last year, you've got a pretty strong majority of folks who I'm assuming are going to be in support of this and have kind of been through the process of developing it. A couple of questions about the ordinance. Page 5 of the ordinance, it's 9.14.020, section 4, units within all multi-unit residences. What?
Where are you again?
Packet page 10.
Okay.
Ordinance page 5. And I won't spend too much time on this because a lot of this is nitpicky. But why do we have this section? Units within all multi-unit residences, and then it essentially says smoking in a new unit of a multi-unit residence violates this. Smoking in a not new unit of a residence violates this. Isn't it kind of just?
I can explain it quickly.
Yeah.
It's basically they're giving an extra year for the people in the old residences.
Yes.
And so you have to draft it that way.
Effective date. I see. I didn't catch that. Thank you very much. I take that back.
I just have to prove I actually read it.
Yeah. and I didn't read it closely enough. Although I'll hopefully redeem myself with this one. On the next page, section 9.14.xxx, but the one under 050, it seems to be missing the smoking is prohibited in. It just kind of starts with outdoor common areas.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
There's also a typo at window.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, is there?
Yeah.
And then, I was surprised by a couple of other things, but it's not worth going to. And then I think those were kind of the big questions I had.
Great.
I have one short question for you. Take 1 second. Why do we have the bingo exception?
It's an excellent question. It's been there forever.
Can we take the bingo exception out?
Bingo.
I think the way it is now at least consistent with the. Do you want to answer that?
I thought it came up at some point.
It came up before.
Yeah,
it did come up before, and
We debated
it
this
has
for
to do with
hours.
employees versus volunteers.
I thought Molly was going to look at it, but I think that was the response last time.
I don't know.
Oh, man.
No one told me about the bingo. No.
So what I remember we added last time was consistent with prohibition on smoking contained in the labor code section 6404.5. That was what we added to not exempt all bingo games. But these are the ones that are.
So there's some state law that allows it.
That bingo lobby.
So there's a bingo lobby that has a state law on bingo.
Can we take it out?
We did at the county.
We could remove it.
Oh.
You did what?
We
They took it out.
took it out at the county.
Okay, so we can remove it.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's an old state.
So antiquated.
I just wanted to be
You want us
clear.
to remove it? I mean, if it's,
Well, we have to make a motion.
yeah, I know.
So I just had a couple quick questions. So the idea of establishing a smoking area, I guess, can be done by the property owner.
Yes.
Yes.
And so what happens in a situation where it's a condo duplex and there are two owners and they disagree?
There's no smoking area
Then
created.
there's no
Yeah.
smoking area.
Yeah.
So they have to agree, majority of owners?
Right.
They could start walking around the block because when you're in transit, it's still allowed to smoke.
Okay. And then I also wasn't clear on, so second units attached to an R1 home, does that fall under this ordinance?
It is actually in the definitions. So under multifamily, it does So multi-unit resident does not include a hotel, a mobile home park, a single-family home, and a single-family home with a detached or attached in-law or second unit.
So where are you reading?
It's
Page
page
8,
three of
packet
the, page 3 of the ordinance. It's under the definition of multi-unit residence.
Oh, halfway down.
Okay. So then on page 4 under unit, it includes in-laws and second units.
Oh. Interesting. We will fix them.
If you could just
Which
check.
one do you want?
No, I think the definition of multi-unit is
Okay.
is good with the exclusions,
All right.
and it may be okay. Just I wasn't able to trace the definition all the way through. Okay,
we'll make
so
them we will make them consistent.
and then Terrence, how does this compare to other laws you've seen?
It is exactly in line with other laws that I've seen that are trying to be kind of, I guess aggressive might be overstating it, but progressive and assertive in the area. So I think we're really right on track and kind of in the forefront. So one thing that I did want to mention, it relates to page 7 toward the bottom. We did have discussions, and I raised this with staff regarding how best to phase this in. And I think there was a desire perhaps to give landlords 6 months, perhaps a year notice of this so that they could change lease terms. We could do an education program instead of, immediately imposing this on them next month. So I think most cities at a minimum give 6 months, many give a year, so that way it could be included in the lease terms, and it's much easier for them to enforce going forward.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
So that one question I did have actually while I was reading this is how do we provide note? I mean, do we have a list of all just send it to every landlord or landowner that we have, multi-unit resident landowner that we have, or and condo complex?
Yes, that's what we would do. We would send them probably an FAQ. We would have it online. That's what other cities have done, basically send it to their list with a very, send the ordinance, but also a more simple
Sort of fact sheet.
description,
Sure.
fact sheet,
Yeah.
and proposed lease language they could use,
Mm-hmm.
and signage suggestions. Did you
And
have
the-
anything
Our
else?
lists
We
aren't
did the
perfect,
same.
and they're near.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so there'll be nothing will fall through the cracks at all. So the one more thing. So the signage was one thing that I was thinking about, because this is almost one of the most contentious things that we deal with in my HOA. Is when people want to put up signs and other people don't like the color, or it's too big, or it's too. Is there some precedent that we have for how we kind of let the different HOAs deal with this, or do we set pretty specific requirements of what the signs need to look like and how big and that kind of stuff?
We didn't set specific requirements of the county. We provided sort of a variety of either sort of smaller window decals, aluminum signs, and sort of worked individually.
Okay, so it's
with
left
the-
pretty open.
Yeah, like these are available, and then in some cases they wanted to do their own
Mhm.
type of signage. So
Okay, good.
Because we're looking for a motion that encompasses bingo halls and maybe sets the time periods.
Can we just do two things just before
Sure.
you actually do it? Yes.
One relates to identifying the phase-in period, really whether you want to do it in 6 months or a year.
That's missing.
Yep.
So, did you have another?
No.
So I had one other one. I do want to clarify on the issue about resources and enforcement. I think the reason the staff felt that some discussion by council might be necessary would be whether or not we really have the capacity to effectively enforce it, or to what degree we would enforce it. And even on a complaint basis. I would say, I couldn't tell you right now that we're effectively enforcing our existing smoking ordinance right now.
Oh, it's a lot better than it used to be.
No, it is, but I think, I mean, just in the, being straightforward about this, I'd offer, I'm not saying that we shouldn't proceed, but I don't want this to turn into a leaf blower type situation.
I knew you were trying to bring up that.
Now, that's something that's really aggravating, and it's longstanding. The truth is, the thought is, it's a culture change that we start to push, and so again, for the most part, it's sort of peer pressure that enforces it. And actually, sorry, I'm going to get on my stump speech about this. The idea that the city can enforce every code that it wants to do other than publicizing it. I mean, I had a police chief a friend in Colorado once. He said 80% of our calls for service don't need a uniformed police officer, they need a neighbor. And so the truth is, I think there needs to be some recognition that this is a kind of community standard, in a sense, that is out there that we can't always send somebody to. And it's still, even enforcement gets tricky. We've talked about how do we design some outreach to start to enforce things on the existing ordinance, and we haven't had the time to do it. So I'm left as one person myself in downtown enforcing the ordinance routinely, kind of with a very soft touch, but it's like, hey man, you really can't smoke in downtown Palo Alto. You could get a ticket one of these days. You just might want to think about it. But a few sketchy guys sometimes when I've said that. So I'm just saying that's the main issue we want to say, is we're not poised to necessarily ensure that we could go out and really do an effective enforcement. But I do think the bully pulpit and the ability to kind of get the message out certainly would serve as the appropriate way. So good.
All right, I'll move that we adopt the ordinance in attachment A.
Second.
And that we do a 1-year period for outreach and then on old units, and then obviously on new units, just like the ordinance says, and that we delete the bingo exception. I've always wanted to say that.
Can you sing it though?
It's B-I-N-G, yes.
Can you speak to why you don't like bingo?
Well,
It seems kind of
as the person who's most against bingo in the room, mostly because I never win. So you seconded the...
I did, so you did the first, so you need to comment.
I think you just...
No, I think this is really good. I will comment on what Jim said. I completely understand the staff's concern that we're going to say, we've heard there's, someone smoking over there, you need to solve this problem, and that it could be a difficult problem to solve. But I do think the public benefits far outweigh it, especially in the fact, as our public speaker said, it allows homeowners associations and landlords, basically forces them to put it in the lease. Most people are law-abiding citizens, and most people. So you start to change the culture, as Councilman is saying. I think this is a really good step in the right direction. And we're just coming in at the tail end to take credit, so thank you to you guys.
It was stuck in policy and services.
It took new fresh blood to take it over. So I think that this does really, as we said, change the culture. Watching it for a long period of time, eventually people really get it that you don't smoke. I think I don't think this is going to be incredibly troublesome, because I think that the homeowners associations will really police themselves in many ways, don't you think? Once you've got a club, it's a lot easier to stop this happening. I think probably the most problematic areas are those that are designated for smoking, and somehow, which we do allow. And I'm thinking, that's always a little tricky. I was so glad when the airlines started putting in the glass in cage-like things that you smoke in, because truly, I mean, that at least really contains the smoke. I think the one other problem we have that this doesn't address, obviously, is the amount of smoking that goes on behind businesses, especially behind restaurants. And that's always a little disturbing as you walk in a back way and everyone's out there smoking. And don't we have an ordinance regarding that, as
Yeah,
I
we do.
recall?
We do, we just,
Right.
the-
We
just
just
our
don't
city
enforce
manager
it.
is not downtown enough to enforce
No,
it.
I am. As a matter of fact, I'm in the alleys all the time. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
So, but that doesn't really relate to this, because we're talking about multifamily and so forth. And I think this really does hit a problem that obviously has been long-term. Thank you so much for coming. It's great to have somebody who says, this really is a problem, help us out with it. It makes it much easier to pass it and enforce it. So I think this is a good direction. I have a feeling we probably have not seen the very end of non-smoking, but this goes a long way. I mean, when you finally get multi-units, and I remember at the county saying, could we ever enforce it? And I think actually it's happened. So, good job, everyone. Thank you,
You have any comments?
Mark and Tom, from your last year's good work, and that means that I think we can just put it on consent and
Yep.
pass it forward.
So I don't have any comments either, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, since that was unanimous, I think we can go ahead and place it on consent.
Healthy city, healthy community, one of your 4 priorities.
Yes, it is, right.
So let,
So the second item here is the tobacco retailer licensing. We do have a memo here. You guys haven't read it?
No.
I actually read it.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, we could just sum it up for you by saying that the new thing that occurred after we wrote the staff report and before your meeting was we had another
Is that this one here?
good meeting with the county,
Yes.
or a good meeting with the county, where they said, yeah, we can probably run this thing for you, run the retailer licensing program. So we've been talking, Jim wrote a letter, our city manager wrote a letter to them requesting that they very seriously consider this without making any commitments on our part. And they thought about it among themselves, the county, the public health department and the environmental health department are 2 groups that would both coordinate to run this program. So Nicole is for public health, and the environmental health folks stepped up as well and said, yes, we can most likely do this. So that was the new information we wanted to bring to you. Your last direction to us was to say, go back and seriously consider running this ourselves, having the city run it. But it really looks like to us a better option to have the county do it. They already do it in the unincorporated areas. They'd realize economies of scale in doing it in a larger area. We'd sort of realize economies of economies of scale by trying to do something for a relatively small number of facilities. And there'd be the audit the provisions, the bookkeeping concerns, the handling of money, all these things which, when you do it for a small number of facilities, ends up being more time-consuming than you'd think. So
It's really the county's job to do it, to be honest.
Right.
I think it is the county's job to be doing it.
seems to be working well in San Mateo County to have the county doing it for the cities.
Well, again, the council wants to try to keep a handle on adding staff. And this is an opportunity where we have a clear ability to have somebody else do it.
Does anybody have questions?
yeah, so I'm completely convinced. Let's have the county run it. We don't need to have another program we run in the city. I think it's a great program. Definitely want to move forward on it. Terrence, have you looked at the draft ordinance? I mean, could we just adopt this, or do you need to go back and look at it and come back with it?
We need
Still a
to,
discussion with the county as well.
This one,
Yeah.
the one attached.
We have to
Pump the
adapt
brakes.
it to Palo Alto, basically. It would have an intro saying Palo Alto adopts this ordinance, the county's our agent, and then probably add some additional definitions to have county health and county environmental defined in here.
So the procedure for moving forward would be to direct staff to continue discussions with it and to draft an ordinance based on the county.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Would that
an
be the-
agreement with the county.
And an agreement with, so it's,
The efficient way to do it would be to have those two documents come back, we thought, to full council. The agreement with the county and the ordinance, draft ordinance.
But we would, the committee's going to make a motion that directs us to do this, right? So again, we could be in the same situation of being able to put something on consent potentially and not have to, I mean,
Right.
not have to have this whole discussion again with the council if
That's what I'm
everything's clear.
thinking. Agreement with the county. What else do we need? I mean, agreement with the county
The
and a
ordinance.
draft ordinance, right?
And the ordinance would be exactly the same as the county's, except for. the
Ordinance.
intro
So I
part.
just say based on the county ordinance, because that leaves you
Yes.
So I have some questions if you're.
almost
I
done.
mean,
I'm sure you are, I just want to understand what we're doing.
While Greg is writing,
Okay.
let me just say that last time, and you were part of this, Mark, we got into a discussion about the age limit. And so part of the deal is the county would need us to adopt the exact same ordinance to make it efficient for them to run. So we'd be increasing the age of sales from 18 to 21.
Do you want me to ask all my questions on that now, or should I wait until it's my
Well, it's
turn?
Greg's turn, but
No, I'm done. I mean, it's up to Tom.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I mean, that is the thing that jumps out at me. And since we had that conversation at Policy and Services, I've had conversations with other folks and gained more information that at the time made me a little more okay with it. And then, frankly, I've forgotten all of that information and didn't think that I needed to go back to review it because it wasn't on in our staff report that we had, that we received before this meeting. And so, what I would ask of, I mean, the first question I have is why? Why is it that it needs to be exactly the same? What would the big deal be about still having it be 18 in Palo Alto, and having it be 21 in the county? Kind of, what's the need to have it be exactly the same?
I think it's just easier in terms
It's
of
their enforcement.
right in terms of the environmental health inspectors having to go in and assess compliance on a variety of sort of provisions. It's our recommendation that it be exact just for the ease of that, because there's a number of sort of signage requirements and other things that the stores are required to have that show age limits and other things, and I think it's just sort of our
I think
stance.
if I could just step in here too, having talked to Jim Blamey, who's the head of the other group there, who would be doing the inspections. I think for them it's a precedent issue too. I think for them this is a nice pilot. We'd be the first city in Santa Clara County to do this with the county, but the precedent they wouldn't want to set is each city can sort of do their own thing, and that would be, if it were just Palo Alto and if it were just one thing, that would be different. But I think they're looking for a situation where this may become the model for Santa Clara County, and they need the model to be the same.
So I'm sympathetic to that, and I get it. What I'm going to ask our staff and what I'm going to ask the county staff, because what we did not get last time is more information as to why we should raise the age to 21 and why that's not, as my colleague who was on Policy and Services last year, I don't know if he explicitly said this in the meeting, but why that's not ageism. I mean, why a 19-year-old that can go off to war and make the decision to go off to war and give their life for the country can't decide to buy, isn't mature enough to make the decision to buy a cigarette. Because that's what we're saying is somebody who's 19 can make that decision, can probably buy a gun, I'm guessing, but isn't mature enough to buy a cigarette. And maybe there is good information. I'm sure that you guys had a lot at the county when you made that decision. I haven't seen that. And so I'm okay with this coming back on consent as long as it comes back with that information. And if I'm not comfortable with that information, then I'll see if there are enough colleagues to pull it off consent. I don't think we need to put it on.
So, Mark, just briefly, are you looking for a legal analysis that gives you the ability to do this?
No, I think it's been
because
said.
otherwise it's a policy discussion about, we don't let people, so I mean, you're looking for why, that people smoke, you're looking for data that says teens learn to smoke at 18, they learn to smoke less at 21. I'm just really not sure what you want from them.
So it's not legal, it is policy. And it's why is it a better policy? I mean, you know, kind of the point that I made a couple of months ago, you know, if smoking is bad and smoking is bad for everybody and you're an adult at 18, which is what the law states, then why don't we ban smoking for everybody? Why are we deciding to just ban smoking for people who are 18, 19, and 20? I mean, like, you know, and I mean, I guess that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around is why are we treating people who are 18, 19, and 20 differently than people who are 21, 22, and 23 when it comes to smoking?
We do it with alcohol.
Correct. But I think that, you know, the history of that, I think I made this point earlier, is states only went along with that because the federal government threatened to withhold their transportation funding if they didn't. So it wasn't necessarily, and maybe that's it, and maybe I end up going along with this because it's easy to hire the county to enforce it. But if there's data, if there's information, I would love to get that. That would make me, you know, feel a lot more comfortable about treating 18, 19, and 20-year-olds differently for cigarettes when, you know, for all intents and purposes, they're adults.
I think we can do what works. So, Tom, in a minute, I chime in.
Yep.
Thanks.
Louis?
So, Mark, I'm having a hard time with that. Again, it is 21 for drinking, you know, and no matter what kind
and 18 for war.
Well, although that's the case, and we're probably going to be accused of nannyism, but I think, frankly, the longer you can keep teens from smoking, there is, and we could look this up for you, scientific evidence.
That's all I'm asking
that
for.
There is scientific evidence that the longer anyone goes without becoming addicted. So what you allow is when the 18-year-old can buy a cigarette or the 16-year-old can buy a cigarette, all documented, you guys, that the addiction, and we discuss this a lot in terms of suicide. The brain, the fully developed adult brain is about
25.
Yes, about 25. We're not going to keep them from smoking until they're 25.
Long way up to 25. That's what I'm trying to. I need some logic.
But since there is consistency, and we could come up with good scientific evidence that says, if you're going to promote non-smoking, I think what you're doing is you are attempting to keep someone from becoming addicted. Smoking is incredibly addictive. I can look up all those old medical articles I used to quote. It is one of the most. It is actually more addictive in some ways than alcohol. And once you're addicted to smoking, I don't know if any of you have been smokers and stopped. Once you're addicted, it is so hard to stop. So I think what you do with this is you really do a public health service. If you can some way keep kids, and they're still kids in their teens, from smoking till they're 21. We can't do it beyond that, but the development doesn't happen like bam, at 25 you're done. It gets better and better and better. If 21 is what the county has been using, and it is what the county is using, I remember.
As of a couple years ago, though, correct?
It just went into effect January
This year.
last year.
But they've discussed it they had the same conversations about this.
Yeah.
Why do we have to wait, blah, blah, blah. But I couldn't more strongly support the 21-year-old age. And I'll be delighted to go back through scientific evidence and bring it, seriously. And because you won't accept it from me, I'm sure, let's get staff to produce it as well.
No, your background, of course I'll accept it.
I have a pretty good background in this.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty strongly about smoking.
Yeah.
So my dad smoked 2 packs a day. He'd been addicted from the time he was probably 12 or 13. It's a miserable way to die, by the way, miserable. If you can stop a couple of people from becoming addicted, you've done some good for your community. Not to be overboard about this, but you can tell I feel pretty strong.
Absolutely. I've got some
you take those
questions as soon as
public
Tom
health
comes.
people, and they get pretty adamant.
Not to really cut that off, but do you have any other questions on retailer licensing? So I have a few. And just real quickly at 18, we kind of got into this last time where it was almost generational. For me, 18 is about keeping it off of high school campuses, which is part of the retailer licensing thing. So you have 18-year-olds at high schools, they can buy for their friends. To me, that's the difference between 18 and 21. So just so I understand this, the county will handle registration, so businesses will pay a tobacco license fee to the county. And then there are county health inspectors that would unannounced drop in.
Yes.
But is that meant to be enforcement or just looking for signage?
It's compliance checks, so they'll go in at least once a year to each business and check for everything other than illegal sales to minors. So they'll check to see if they have their age warning sticker, that they're compliant with window coverage laws, that they're not selling flavored tobacco products, that they don't have self-service access tobacco products, those kinds of things.
And do we have any other service in the city that we send merchants to the county for at this point?
Well, they have to get, merchants have to get a lot of things from the county that are health related.
Okay, so on the city website, will we communicate clearly that, this handoff to the county?
Yeah, well, there are only 30 of these retailers, so once we are getting closer to implementing, we would notify them all. And I've already had calls from at least one gas station saying, what is it now in Palo Alto? Is it 18 or 21? And so they know, and they're following it.
So even though the county's doing it, will the city have information and communicate it?
Yes, that would be part of the MOU, the exchange of information.
So, just one quick question. Are we covering grocery stores as well?
We're covering everything.
It would be any place that sells tobacco or electronic cigarettes.
It sounds then like there are more than 30 outlets if we're including grocery stores.
No.
I don't think many grocery stores.
A couple.
Yeah, I'm sure they do.
Not in Palo Alto.
No.
Not Whole Foods, but some of them do.
Some of them do.
Only the Safeway on Middlefield.
Yeah, try Safeway.
Yeah, but there's only
That's
one.
where I get all of mine.
So then,
There's only one Safeway in Palo Alto.
but
Yeah.
so then in terms of like police enforcement, that would be Palo Alto Police?
For the age, as opposed to the other things that Nicole mentioned, the age thing would be Palo Alto's responsibility. And so we've had extensive discussions with police, and in the your At Places memo, you see that paragraph at the bottom of the first page spilling over to the second page that lets you know that the police are way understaffed at the moment. They can't commit to doing this immediately, this decoy operation immediately. We talked to Chief Burns just a couple days ago about this, and this was the language that he felt you needed to see in here about that.
But if some merchant popped up close to a school and started selling cigarettes, the police would enforce that as well?
Well, our police could enforce it, or the county could enforce it.
Right. Okay. I just wanted to be clear on.
Yeah, it's just the age thing that is really would be us alone having to be the investigators.
That age thing again.
Good. Okay.
Can I ask two quick follow-ups? So the first is, and I was reminded of this when I was finishing up dinner before the meeting. I was grabbing dinner on University and was finishing up and couldn't help but notice the smell of cigar smoke wafting by. Because I was eating dinner right down the street from the cigar shop on University in between Cowper and something else. Do we have, is there anything, do we force establishments that sell cigarettes or cigars in our downtown business districts to have some sort of signage that says you can't smoke inside within the business district? And could we add something like that? Because I think we have a pretty airtight rule now, right? That you pretty much can't smoke within pretty large block areas.
The whole district.
Yeah.
But they can smoke inside their
We don't have good
business.
signage.
You're asking whether we can insist that the business owner put up the sign?
Yeah, because I mean, if somebody goes in the cigar shop, buys a cigar, walks right out and thinks, I just bought a cigar, I'm going to start smoking it. You know, they should know you can't do that within a...
There's a sign right outside of that particular shop, but it's kind of small.
But so we have a pilot sign program, and we're going to roll out more signs sponsored by the cities. But I guess we don't have anything in our ordinance that requires businesses to.
Well, we do. We ask them to put up signage wherever smoking is not permitted, but in a public space that would be our responsibility.
Yeah, so I don't mean the public space. I
You
mean
mean like the window or inside?
Or yeah, like a little sign by the cash register that
Do you
says,
have
by
that
the
in
way,
mind?
you can't smoke downtown.
We don't, because the smoking regulation or tobacco use regulations is in a separate ordinance. So we haven't sort of looked at that crossover. It's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
But we could look at that, and when we package this thing, we've got to tinker with the ordinance again.
Yeah, so just something to
Could be an
consider.
implementation
Yeah.
strategy.
Probably our smoking ordinance would have to refer to this tobacco, and we can't combine them, it's too much. And so we would
But
then address it in
procedurally,
that,
we could,
yeah.
it'd be a different part of the ordinance, but it'd be efficient to do it, to bring it back to full council at the same time.
Great.
So let us look into that.
Something to check out. And then, so, let me be clear to everybody, to the public, that I'm not pro-smoking. And I agree with everything that Liz said, except for one thing I have a question about. Liz, you mentioned we can't do this. You said we can't, you said, we should do everything that we can to prohibit smoking and stop people from getting addicted up to 21 because we can't do it after that. And I don't know that that's the case. Is there any law that says that you can only prohibit smoking up to a certain age?
I think it's just that we're looking to the county to enforce it, and they have said 21.
So I understand that. I want us to be clear that we're choosing 21. It's not that the law says that there's a ceiling. We could say 25 if we wanted to.
we're trying to
it
mimic
would
the
complicate
county.
things with the county. But I don't know if there is a law that.
The short answer is that we could have, as it relates to what we're doing here with respect to licensing, we could have a higher age if we so desired. But it raises, and I should flag this issue for you all as it relates to this issue generally. California state law criminalizes the sale of tobacco to minors. And it has the 18. And there is an issue concerning whether localities can have a different age. A number of counties have looked at this, and the legal term is preemption, whether local government is preempted from having a different age. And a number of counties have looked at this, obviously Santa Clara County, and I think there is a number of counties that have concluded that because we are not criminalizing the sale, we are fine, as long as we are.
This is fine.
This is fine. It's fine with civil penalties that we are fine. But you all should know that Santa Clara County is is an outlier when it comes to this. I've spoken to county council from Santa Clara County and have discussed their legal analysis, and also San Francisco County, which is also looking at this, and reviewed their legal analysis, and I think they're correct on the preemption issue. Also, the legislature is looking. There is a bill in the assembly to raise the age to 21 as well. Two cities, Hillsburg, in 2014 did raise it to 21, but then pulled back and decided not to go forward with that. And then had some discussions about seeking an opinion from the Attorney General's office, but also have decided not to necessarily pursue that. Berkeley just recently adopted an ordinance, but that is not effective until January of 2017. But again, I think Santa Clara County has done its research. I've reviewed their research. This went into effect in January of this year. I believe there is an organization, National Association of Tobacco Outlets, that monitors efforts by counties and cities, and they were aware of Santa Clara's efforts and elected not to take any legal action to prohibit that from going forward.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful.
Okay, great. So can I get a motion on this item?
All right. I'll move that we, looking through to see when it, here it is. I'll move that we direct staff to develop an agreement with the county to develop a tobacco retailer licensing program and for the county to do the enforcement. And that our staff draft an ordinance substantially similar to the county ordinance, and that we move forward once we have the agreement in place and the ordinance, and that it goes then to either council on the consent calendar if we get 4 votes. If we don't get 4 votes, it just goes to council.
I'll second that.
Oh, sorry.
Can't second everything.
Pardon?
Nothing.
I can't
So
second
do
them
you have
all.
any more comments?
I don't, unless you want me to make comments.
No, I just think, I think it's a good program. I thank you, Nicole, for coming to the meeting tonight. So all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Successful
very
visit.
So let
Thanks,
me do
Nicole.
one final
Don't bring
shout
the
out, just so it's on the record.
Appreciate it.
The person at the county who drove this is Ken Yeager, and I.
He got
served-
mad at me.
I served with Ken for a
The
long
last
time,
meeting.
and I think in many ways he should be credited for pushing this and pushing it really hard. So.
Ken, I
he
don't
is
want
a-
any more angry emails.
Why is angry?
After the
Ken?
last meeting, he got mad at me in court.
Oh, really?
The 21 thing?
Yeah.
I can see that.
Well, you know, as with many, he's a former smoker, and
Oh.
and he feels very strongly about it.
I could tell.
Yeah.
I'd like to go to adjourn the meeting in honor of Ken Yeager.
Yeah, we
So we
go.
have one more item, which is discussing future agendas. Well, thank you guys, Bill, Kirsten. So I spoke a little bit, so I just wanted to say my intent is to try to run a tight meeting for policy and services, and I wanted to see
Pretty
if I
good
had
tonight.
8:30.
support
Yeah.
from you guys to do that.
Yes.
So I would like to start to have the agenda start to show maybe suggested times. And and I will start, if you guys are okay with it, I would start maybe timing our comments. Maybe we'll do 5-minute rounds or whatever.
You know, I'm not okay with that.
You don't want to do
I
5-minute rounds?
don't want to do timing comments. I don't want to do 5-minute rounds. No, I don't want to do that.
Okay.
Because I think it chills the conversation, and I think it's a small group and messes up the entire notion of a
Yeah.
committee. I think that we're a small group. I don't think that we're a group that's inefficient. We can discuss that if it's not working. But I'm not.
You're okay with the time on the agenda, correct?
Yeah, I don't care
I
if we
like
put
the
times on the
times
agenda.
yeah.
I'm the one who put times on our council agendas.
I
They
would
weren't,
just-
they
I would
weren't
just
there
like
before I
to,
put them on.
I mean, I'd like to give everybody a chance to speak, and then, if you have more to say, we can do another round.
I think it's inefficient and
Yeah,
stupid, these round
so
comments.
let me tell you what I'd really like to do, while we're speaking casually. It would be nice, because there are 4 of us, and I think we often did this in finance last year, to actually have a conversation. Because otherwise, what we do with 5-minute speeches is we give 5-minute speeches. And there's no feedback whatsoever. And I think the purpose of a committee is to have that interchange of information, ideas, and, at some point, Tom, you would be absolutely justified in saying,
Time to cut off
quit,
conversation or.
quit interrupting or,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Right.
Because, your job is to keep us on track. But the occasional interaction, I think, really is advantageous.
Okay, so let's give it a shot. And again, I just wanted you guys to kind of buying into the idea.
Could I just speak to that just for a
Yeah.
second real quickly? Because I think it does extend to the council. I really think it's a good idea, and I'm doing this based on 35 years of experience watching other governing bodies also. This idea of the rounds, the questions, the comments, then the motions. I do think it just reinforces and kind of puts in subliminal pressure on council members to feel, okay, well, I got to speak now each time, versus being in a setting where very often it's not necessary for some people will be more engaged and some oftentimes can say, hey, I agree with that comment. But it isn't to stifle conversation, but it is to use the time efficiently. The second thing I just would say is that even though there isn't timing, I would say that our culture here is that the chair is expected to be really kind of a weak chair as far as managing time or being be able to say, hey, come on, we're really taking longer than we think. And I would just ask if you guys would even consider the chair being able to do that. Not saying I'm going to time people, but the fact if we really if
10
we
minutes
say
left on this item.
yeah, if we've set an item up and stuff, that we try to manage to the time and not let it slip away and just say, well, we've blown it for the whole night and therefore it doesn't matter, we'll just go as long as we need to go. That
I
would be
think
really
Tom
helpful.
can hold us in check.
Yeah, so I will try to do that. I'll do the time check or whatever, just
Yeah.
as we go through the time.
I think the time checks are important, Tom.
Yeah.
Because we can get caught up in stuff and not, not realize it.
Right. So we have a tentative agenda list here. Did you want to go over this?
If we can, so first of all, you should have one, here's one, Liz.
Thanks, I may have just put it in my file.
So, first of all, the only thing, the first two meetings, the only thing with anything programmed and scheduled, what we would do is we'd get a little bit closer, sit down with the chair and work on assigning times as we do like with the mayor and vice mayor for the council meeting, because I wouldn't be able to give you a good sense on the audits as to how long those would take right now. The meeting is on March 22nd. It was going to be on March 8th, but we've got, half of the committee is going to be at NLC, so we've rescheduled this to the 22nd. And I think it's pretty self-evident the issues, we have a bunch of outstanding issues related to the neighborhood engagement initiative. And you guys actually had some separate things. We just combined it in one thing. So this idea of like the co-sponsorship agreement, that's kind of the outgrowth of the Alma Plaza, room use and some of those things. And so we'll be prepared to discuss these, but it's pretty much where you want to go as a committee as to what you do on these things. And then I think all of these are self-explanatory. The prior tentative items identified, that either, let me go back. There are two ways that items get on the council committee agenda. One is that the council, under your procedures, one is that the council refers an item specifically to the committee. The other is that the city manager, on behalf of the staff, is able to put something on the committee. So 7 through 10 are all items that have been specifically referred to the committee. Item number 6, I would recommend that we think about just letting us take this directly to the council. It's the updates to the green building and energy reach codes. The only reason we listed it is the first time we did it. It went to policy and services, but this is an update.
This isn't the one that just came to council that got referred to policy and services?
I don't think so.
Remember you had that one at...
What's Robert?
I'll look at it and see. But so I'll look at that. And then the EV charging station one, here's our discussion. It seems to me that not saying that in every case you would think you might be able to get to some sort of a unanimous vote and then have an item be on consent when it goes to committee, but that would be nice if the idea of sending things to committee was to really delegate some things in a way that you could really work through it and it has the potential to come back. And we just know as a staff, I can't imagine that how we're going to charge for EV charging stations and all that would be something that the council wouldn't want to come back and 9 members of the council would be talking about. And so trying to start practicing some discipline a little bit that says, okay, look, if we're going to have a big conversation about it again at the council, what's the reason to have a pre-discussion at the policy committee? Sometimes it's, wow, you can really flesh out some stuff, or you could hear, but I'm just telling you, it's not very efficient on the staff side of stuff. I'm going to start saying this more. The staff I have on this live in Milpitas, in Millbrae and stuff. So they're going to stay here at night to do something that they'll have to come back on another night and do the same thing with the council.
That one doesn't feel like it's going to be controversial to me. Like, you don't think we could work out most of the details here?
Well, if you guys could guarantee that the council is not going to get into it.
But I think we could at least shorten it.
I think we should try and work out all the details and everything and send it on consent if we can. If we can't, we can't.
Well,
so I had a couple other ones. We
What are we keeping you from?
I think we finished up the protocol update, but I haven't seen that go to council, so I'm not sure where that is.
Okay. Well,
which one is this?
Just the council
I'll look at that.
protocols and procedures.
That's in the attorney's office, but I would disagree with you. I think that we finished up the protocols the way the council talked about them, but but I think that what we started to talk about at the retreat, about how we really get the work done and some of these things, there's
Yep.
some serious.
But we had
Things-
several
right.
meetings where we had red lines. Molly
Right,
had a
right.
draft. I think it was with her. I don't know if the town hall schedule, if that's nothing, we don't need to do
I don't
anything
think
with
that that's
anymore.
you guys. That's sort of in this neighborhood engagement initiative, but, you know, there's nothing that precludes you from having some discussion about how you think that, you know, we sort of test drove it. I don't know, I think it would be worthwhile to get some feedback on the schedule, not, really, if you sort of say, how many should we realistically try to have? That would be important, not the detailed schedule, you know?
And then, I guess dewatering phase 2, would that come up at some point during the year?
I have to look at that. I'm trying to remember what we talked about phase 2. I thought some of that stuff was more automatic, and phase 3 was the really big open-ended stuff that we talked
phase
about
2 you were
coming.
doing anyway. It was phase
Yeah,
3.
phase 3 is the big list of the stuff that we were talking about. I thought we were talking about still coming back to council on that, you know, by the middle of the year.
Okay.
And I think that would be the best way to do
I
it,
actually think you're
because.
coming back to policy and services.
Is it really? I'll check, okay.
I think it is. But why don't you just check? The motion
Yeah.
was clear.
And the last one I had on my list was any follow-up on the airplane noise item later in the year.
Did policy take that up?
We started it last year.
You made a pass at it?
We just approved it on consent, but we had approved a small study.
A pilot, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so that raises an interesting question about, there's been a tendency, if an item once goes to policy and services, and then it takes an action, Molly and I were talking about this, we've sort of gravitated to that somehow remaining within the orbit of the committee, that issue, without really, if there's a new phase of it, does it need to be redirected back from the council to the committee? And I would argue that it's worthwhile to think about the council still directing it,
So
because.
why don't you bring those issues back on
Okay.
to policy and services in terms of
And I think that's a
the
good
protocols,
protocol.
and
Yeah.
just bring it back to us and we can have a discussion.
And that was really just a question, like, what's the next phase of that project, and is there anything that would be useful for policy and services, or does it just go to council?
Okay.
Okay. I have one quick thing.
Sure.
So
Let me know about it, because Cash is supposed to have a little bit of a follow-up conversation with you tomorrow on
Yep.
the
So
airplane noise
I
thing.
thought we were fairly efficient tonight, frankly, in the meeting. I don't know what you guys thought. Fairly efficient. So it was good. It's almost 9 o'clock. I'd really like to start our meetings at 6. I don't really want to get home at 9 o'clock every night on our best nights. That's what it'd be. So I'd move that we start these meetings at 6.
We've done that. Did you not do that last year?
No,
we started
at 7.
You started at 7?
We all started at 6. And policy and services started at 6 before. So much better.
I'm fine with it. It's just we haven't done it before.
Yeah.
I'll tell you why I like it.
Finance did it last week.
I like it because of staff in particular.
Sure.
You know, I'm not as concerned with us as I am with staff, because by 6 o'clock, I know.
I would say the staff generally would prefer, you're
6
working
o'clock,
anyway,
yeah.
you keep working to 6, grab a bite to
Yeah.
eat, and then you go, and then, if it's an hour and a half, you're out at 7:30, that's a whole different thing than.
It's a whole different
you're
thing.
out at
Yeah,
9
yeah.
o'clock.
And
So
I
I can do
admire your
6.
90 minutes, but, if it's 2 hours,
Yeah.
you're still done at 8.
I'm going to aim for 90 and expect 2. So I can do 6 for now. I would just ask, my work schedule might be changing, so we could revisit that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll revisit it if it's a problem, just mention it. And if there's a particular day that's a problem, you're the chair.
So for now, I don't know whether finance officially changed it to 6 or not. I think we did last year. We made a
We did.
motion and we said we'll start at 6 from now on.
We did.
Yeah. So we're saying we will do this until you need to look at it again, Tom, is that right?
Until we reevaluate.
Okay.
Okay, so moved.
You good?
Yep.
Meeting
Need
adjourned?
a motion?
All right.
I've got
Fantastic.
one question for you. I know you got a
Thanks,
hot day, you gotta get out of
I
here.
do? Okay, let's go. What's the issue? What's the question?
Just sit back there. Just answer it.